Welcome to the Feminine Truth Podcast with Mary Miranda, a place where you can reconnect with your wild, cyclical, and fierce truth. I am Mary Miranda, a mentor, guide, healer, and intuitive coach. I guide women on a journey of remembrance, reconnection, and embodiment of their inner feminine truth. Join me each week to tap into raw, unedited, and unfiltered sacred conversations to help women tap into their inner feminine truth to become bold, unshakable, and apologetic in who they truly are. Let's jump into today's sacred conversation. Welcome to another episode of the Feminine Truth Podcast with your host, Mary Miranda. Today, I am so excited to bring you Sean, who I found on TikTok in my For You page. And it was one of those TikToks about masculine energy and dating. So literally, I resonated with his energy and I connected with him and I told him if he was open to doing an interview. So here we are. Sean, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
I actually have to tell you something. I don't know how to pronounce your last name. That's why I didn't say it.
Totally fine. It's pretty common. My last name is pronounced Rocky Jic. It's from Serbia, and we changed the spelling when we immigrated to try to make it easier, and it did not become easier.
I'm Mexican. I already have an accent and I struggle with last names. I butcher people's last names and I apologize beforehand, but I still don't know how to pronounce your last name.
Give it time. Give it time. We'll get there.
But I'm so excited to have you here. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey and your story? Because you normally, like, I invited you because I really like your take on the masculine energy, feminine energy, and dating. That's what I was really drawn to you. But once I started following you, you also post a lot of content about Airbnb and wealth and mindset. But can you tell us a little bit about your story and your journey?
Sure. I was raised in Wisconsin. Both my parents were Marines. They actually met in Okinawa, Japan while they were stationed. So that's fun. So I came from a pretty rough background, also quite poor. My parents had their own demons, alcoholism, stuff like that. And in a nutshell, I was raised in an environment that induced a lot of like childhood trauma. And I kind of carried that in my back pocket for a long time. And I went through different phases of coping with the trauma. One was validation seeking behavior, which actually made me successful. I'm pretty sure I got into sales after high school. And that was my first like successful six-figure income, was selling newspaper subscriptions. But I was doing it because I wanted people to think I was good enough. And I really looked up to my boss. That energy, that momentum from being good at sales, but as a way to kind of compensate for not feeling good enough, brought me to Texas. I went homeless in 2009 after I had a fallout with that company. They kind of just used me up and it kind of went the way it did. And bouncing off rock bottom from homelessness, I started my first business and became a business owner. And that has been a huge learning experience. That was 2009, 2010. So I've been a business owner for about 13 years. And I've learned a lot about myself, what it means to be a leader, what it means to be a man or to be masculine in my experiences with employees and customers, friends, stuff like that. And I think I would say that I was still largely compensating for shadow work that I needed to do probably until about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago. And I became more open-minded to the concept of all the woo stuff, right? Like shadow work and spirituality and things. And by opening my mind to the concept of doing this work, I kind of invited all that in. And it was a roller coaster for a couple of years. But as you saw on TikTok, I've started to really find my perspective on topics like this, on masculinity and the divine feminine and stuff like that. So business owner, kind of ex-capitalist, still functional, but I'm not as hoorah with capitalism as I used to be after all of this. And I'm still every day trying to understand myself a little bit more and just be a better person every day.
How do you feel your upbringing has shaped you to be the man that you are today when it comes to dating?
I am a conflict avoidant kind of person. And I'm also really optimistic. One of the things that I said as a kid, when people ask me about how I handled my childhood so well, or how I handled my family abuse so well, is I would say, I'm Teflon. Nothing gets to me. I'm just Teflon.
Mm.
That became a philosophy of life, I think. And so instead of having boundaries and self-advocating and walking away from people or whatever, I just try to be stronger than the challenge of whatever the person was. So I constantly step up in relationships, be there for people, be strong for people. So that way I didn't need boundaries because I was just strong. I was too strong to need boundaries. There's nothing you could do to me. And that was a large portion of how I um, had my relationships. But the positive side of that is I always took accountability for anything that I did wrong. I always tried to change. I always tried to understand where I could be better. So I never really attacked people, or I was never really a victim in my storyline, because my goal was always to be strong enough to handle everything, which was like a personal growth kind of side effect. So there's a lot of positives that were baked into that, but the negative one was I just really didn't have any boundaries. And I'm learning how to handle that now without losing the moral of the story, or the main virtue of it all, which was, if you can always take accountability even when it's not your fault, you'll have the best chance of personal growth anyway. So even if something wasn't your fault, you still try to make it, like, you take the blame wherever you can. And then from there, I've learned a lot about myself. I've become quite resourceful, creative, and it's allowed me to be generous and, I guess, grateful for the company of other people. And that has led me to be this protector, provider, good listener, non-combative, willing to take criticism kind of guy, I guess.
So, what are some things? Because I'm just trying to understand. You grew up with two parents that were alcoholics and Marines, but what kind of trauma did you go through that was very painful for you as a child?
So my parents divorced when I was 7 or 8, and it actually was like a positive experience to know that they wouldn't be fighting anymore. Um, my mother was the more violent one, and she was actually quite manipulative. So she was very good at restructuring the narrative of a situation to try to make you feel like trash. She'd say things like, she'd say things like, and you kids wonder why I drink, or she'll say things like, your dad wanted an abortion. Like, she'd just like try to leverage anything against you that she could. And she was really good at pulling out emotion from you, try to get you angry, and then she'd play victim and make it look like you were like this assailant. And so a lot of my day to day as a child was trying to survive the chaos and mood swings of my mother, whether she'd be angry and violent or whether she'd try to be manipulative and trap you. You never really knew. Um, my mother eventually lost custody, so the state took my brothers. I was too old. I was already 18, but my two younger brothers ended up my brother Jacob was a ward of the state, and my brother Joe went into foster care because she was like for violence related child abuse. But before she finally got caught up in the state, took my brothers, it was, bouts of violence. It was manipulation. She always had a different guy in her place all the time. She's just like, you know, she's a hot mess. So a lot of emotional manipulation. So.
And when you were going through those moments when your mom was acting like that, per se, how did you handle that as a child? Like, how did you soothe yourself? Like, did you just close off? Were you able to cry, like, even on your own in the room? Or, like, how was your process as a child to be able to handle those situations?
So when you're raised in an environment that is always a certain way, you don't know something's off or wrong or whatever. So you adjust, right? So in a way, I think a lot of it was disassociated. Like, I was disassociated from the feeling that anything was wrong. It was just my life. Um, and maybe that's why I adopted this really optimistic demeanor somehow, right? And it became naive. It was like naive over optimism. That's something I guess I still struggle bus with. Might be ADHD too, right? But and then music. I got into music, and so I would escape into things like music. I used to read fiction too. I used to read fiction books back then, but I really do think that most of it was the brain just finding a way to shut it out, because it just happened every day.
Hmm. How's your inner child today?
I'm finally recognizing the concept of, shadow work and trying to build a relationship with my inner child. I remember I had a therapy session, and the guy said to me, "All right, I want you to imagine yourself in a corridor full of mirrors, right? And all the mirrors have all the hard memories from your childhood, right? Everything bad that's ever happened to you. And you're walking on this corridor, and you're seeing your child self in all these memories. What would you say to what would you say to your child?" He said something like that. I'm like, "Man, I don't even recognize that kid," was my response, right? And he's like, "Oh," he's like, "Okay." He's like, "Did you know that that's how like multiple personality disorder can form? You disassociate so much from your child self that you just don't recognize your own self." He's like, "I'm not saying you have multiple personalities, but that's kind of one of the precursors." I'm like, "Thanks for that. Thanks, guy." Um, but I'm finally speaking to my child, right? I'm finally having those conversations and holding space instead of just disassociating from that broken person that I left behind
Mhm,
so many decades ago.
mhm. Do you feel like a lot of men don't do this inner work because they don't know how to do it, because they're not conscious, or just they're just don't men are, because I know men struggle with mental health, and
Mhm.
it's very frowned upon for men to cry and show their emotions. So what do you feel like it needs to happen in the world for men to awaken to do this inner work, to heal their inner child or reconnect with their inner child?
I think introspection is a skill, right? Just as much as communication is. So, and you can say introspection or contemplation or meditation, all these things are learned, right? We've been raised in a world where we don't talk about our feelings much, so much that there's this word I discovered called alexithymia. Alexithymia is the inability to describe your feelings. Crazy awesome word. And there's so much of that because we don't look inward as kids, because we're not allowed to vocalize our feelings. We're actually told to disassociate from our feelings, right? So trained disassociation creates the inability to look inward to process. And I think that's where most men are. So we need to, from a young age, encourage contemplation as a practice and introspection and communicating what we're discovering about ourselves on the inside, right? That feedback loop then trains the brain to be able to even do the work. But I think a lot of guys don't even have they're not even wired for it because we were trained to do the opposite.
Mhm. I just feel like a lot of men don't do the inner work, and it needs to be talked about. It's I know I'm Mexican, so I know this is very frowned upon in my culture. And I know, like, when I didn't even know the impact of my childhood or the impact of the way that I was brought up, the conditioning, the programming, the belief systems, me as a woman, I didn't even know this until I was like in my late 20s, close to my early 30s. That's when I started like seeing the impact and understanding why I kept attracting the relationships I was attracting, and how I didn't even want to say that wanted to see a therapist. So even for me as a woman, I felt a lot of shame. I cannot even think about what men go through and sympathize with that.
Well, men in that Catholic shame-based culture experience shame also, right? So the shame and the machismo, right?
Ugh.
The outer stimuli is to be stronger than your environment and to show outward strength and to recognize that something is wrong with yourself is an admission of weakness in a way, right? So that's why we don't go through that stuff. And so, yeah, men need to do the inner work and we need to have these conversations, but it needs to almost be like a blueprint in a way that is like a for absolute beginner's guide to having internal conversations about how you feel, and then have conversations with people you trust about how you feel. And it's almost like you need to make a wiki how for men, like step by step to how to recognize your emotions, right? How not to run from them when you recognize them, how to communicate them, how to contemplate your emotions. It's men first need to be told that it's not their fault that they are the way that they are, right? Because if there are so many men, just such a high percentage of men that are incapable of recognizing their own emotions, we can't blame the individual man for what is a systemic masculinity problem, right? And in order for them to even try, we have to forgive them in a way, be like, hey guys, this isn't actually your fault. This isn't optimal, but it's not your fault. So let's first recognize it without blame and start working on it one step at a time.
Do you think there's a lot of blame that men receive from society, from culture, from women?
I think men recognize most critiques as blame anyway, right? See, there's a narrative of blame there. I mean, have you ever been in a relationship where you try to tell somebody how you feel and then they feel attacked and they defend themselves,
Yeah.
right? They feel like you're blaming. So we are so predisposed, we're so wired for that that we interpret blame almost at any avenue because of the way that we're groomed as men to, you know, um, if you're gonna cry, I'll give you something to cry about. Be a man, buck up, stop being a wuss, like all that kind of stuff. That just general trajectory that kids were raised on is the same thing that causes this predisposition to feel like we're being critiqued, attacked, or blamed whenever there's something to be said. We don't have healthy discourse. So even if when you say, hey, I'm feeling unseen or I'm feeling unloved, I feel like we don't have intimate conversations, or I feel like you don't care what I'm doing throughout my day. But I feel like when I'm around, you don't care about what I'm up to. And then he'll go into his phone to try to defend himself. Be like, no, I just texted you an hour ago, 2 hours ago, that one time, right? Because men are wired to understand whether or not they did something wrong. So yeah, I think we're just that blame is embedded, and that's why we have that problem.
Yeah, and I also actually right now that you said that about we're women, we are obviously more emotional. We're more in tune with our emotions, and we want to communicate. We want the emotional intimacy, and men are more logical. So there's also this disconnection, and I I I do require the emotional closeness and have the emotional I guess intimacy with someone. And I remember I was dating someone a long time ago, and I could not bring in my emotions at all, or I'm feeling this way. Like he would not take that. Like everything has to be logic, rational, without intercepting emotions. And I had such a hard time communicating with this person and asking for my needs because I'm all emotions and I wanted to communicate the best way, but it was just not getting across him because he wanted everything rational, everything logical without emotion. And I'm like, I just can't connect like that.
Yeah. So there's a difference here with the way we digest stuff, right? And
Oh.
men don't understand that women want to communicate to feel a sense of closeness and connection, right? So when you're saying, I feel like, we're not doing so well in our relationship, a guy will go, oh no, right? She's saying that she feels like we're not doing so well. There's going to be a condemnation. It's going to go on the record. We're going to grow apart because of this conversation, right? Men think that recognizing that something's wrong in the relationship and trying to discuss where it's coming from is to blame a person so that way people can feel justified in how they feel, to deeper entrench into how they feel. And thus that would cause the relationship potentially end. But when a woman, I guess if we were going to tell a guy, hey, she's going to talk for 30 minutes about how you're a problem, and then she's going to feel so much closer to you after she gets it off of her chest or something like that. That's how a guy would need to hear it. Like, yeah, she's going to say some things that are going to blame. She's going to be blaming you according to your interpretation of how communication works. But then she's going to want to sleep with you 30 minutes later because she feels so connected to you. Like, I don't think guys can fathom that that's actually how women's brains work, that talking about what's not working and hearing each other is what makes them feel close, right? And I don't know if there's really a man way to explain that'll get a guy to sit there and actually take everything that you have to say without thinking that you're trying to tear him down, right? But I think that's one of the big hacks for success in relationships is the guy getting to a place. Well, I think both men and women both need to be able to do this, where when somebody feels like they need to get something off their chest, the other person listens all the way until the other person's done talking, right? Without interrupting, without defending. It's really tough for a lot of people, men and women alike.
Yeah. But there's always like a healthier way to communicate with someone when you want to bring something that is hurting you or something that the person did that made you feel a certain way. You can always say, I love you. I want the best for us, but I want to bring something up. I just want to share with you that when you said that, this is how it made me feel. and this is how I'm taking it in. I'm taking it in, and it hurts me, and I just wanted to communicate that with you. Why did I get goosebumps? I don't know. And then you can say, how does that make you feel? Or what do you think about that? Or something like that, with that, for him to have a minute to respond back. Like, there's ways, like I've done it before, but there's times that I remember that person that I was dating, I asked for words of affirmation, and I said they're important to me, and this is why they're important to me, and they make me feel so happy and special, and made me feel connected with you, and I need that connection in order for me to build a different type of intimacy with you. He would not take it. He would not take it. And he just said that he's not responsible for my emotions, and that I needed to go to therapy. And I'm just like, but I'm asking you for something that I need in this connection with you. But okay, fine. I accepted he was not willing to do that, and I left the person eventually. Yeah.
So with something like that too, it may not be possible for somebody to change, right? Me being ADHD, if I'm not in the presence of a partner, I can hyperfixate on whatever is in front of me, and I can go without communicating. There can be windows of time where like I'm just in Neverland doing something. And if that's something that matters to somebody, like a frequency of communication or a style of communication, I may not be able to change that for another person. So there could be limitations there. And that's why knowing the love languages is so important, right? Not just knowing what they are, but not just knowing what you prefer to give, what your presets for giving are, but what you prefer to receive and how you interpret. Because now there's two sides to that, right? He could try to be more affirmative, but in order for him to do that, he might need to do a lot of work, internal work. Like for me, the first 30-ish years of my life, I could not give or receive compliments because my mom was so manipulative that there was never a time that any words were ever said without some underlying threat, right? So compliments could be used against you. They could be hollow, it could be manipulation. And I was always afraid also that somebody would hear my compliment and then reject it and go, oh, that's stupid, something like that. So I think, for me, that's specific. I'm not saying that all guys go through this, but some people who have the inability to give or receive compliments have maybe like a trauma to work through. And when you express, I best interpret love through communication and words of affirmation. That's the easiest way for me to feel seen and loved. Then that's about as far as I think you need to take the conversation, because then if you do, now coming from the guy's side of the way the guy's brain works, if you go past that and go, so I need you to do this more, guys, when they hear that part, that's the blame part, right? Mm-hmm. But if you say, if you talk about words of affirmation and the guy understands the concept, and you say, the way that I best receive love, the way that's easiest for me to interpret that you feel good and you care about me is through words of affirmation. So when you ask me about my day or when you tell me I'm pretty, that's the time that I feel most good in the relationship. And then you could say, and when you bring me a sandwich, like gift giving or acts of service, that's nice too. But that's not the one that I tend to like look back and go, does he care about me? The stuff that I remember is words of affirmation. You don't even need to at that point say, so I need you to do it more, because if he's listening and he cares in the relationship, he would make a note and he would try to change that. Just understanding that gives him the opportunity to do it without you asking. It's almost like a woman saying, if I have to ask for flowers, I don't want flowers. Yeah. Right? So the moment you ask him for affirmations more, he then takes that he's not doing it enough, and he then feels blame or shame. And that could actually like sabotage the result that could have just come from saying, this is my favorite. Like if you say my favorite color is green, which that's mine. But if you said something like that and he was in the relationship, he might use that later, right? My favorite movie is A Walk to Remember. He might remember that. So I think for women, if I was going to change anything about that communication style, it is going as far to tell them exactly the roadmap to make you happy, and then not ask them to use it, but give it to them clear as fucking day. And they should pick it up on their own. And if he doesn't, that's all you need to know also. And you obviously left, right? You left at one point. So
because I feel like you can communicate your wants, your desires, your needs, and you allow the person to show you if they can meet you there or if they can give you that. And if they're not willing to do it, or they cannot do it for either, like you said, they could have trauma that they're not able to express their emotions because they just can't, then you have to make a decision. Is this something that you can deal with, knowing that this person may never be able to give you the words of affirmation or sweet text messages that you want, or even in person more than anything? Are you okay with this person not being as affectionate as you desired? And then just allow the person to show you. And this is also why it's so important to understand the person's upbringing, traumas, inner child, because you are not only in a relationship with the adult self, you're also in a relationship with their inner child. And it's not like you are handling their trauma, but you also need to be aware of that, because there are things that you have to be conscious about that could hurt them without you even knowing. So when you are aware and conscious, you are going to do the best to not trigger that person, because you know their wounds. And I know it's not like we're responsible for their healing. No, but we are their partners. We want the best for them. We are supposed to be in a safe container for us to also heal each other, because I feel like you can do all the healing work on your own, your inner child, but it's truly gonna show the level of healing you have done once you are in a relationship that feels safe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the difficulty with this specific conversation is, as we're talking about men on, on a larger scale, we can't know which men have done what amount of work, who are even aware of the concept of shadow work, or who are even aware of the concept that their ego is just another voice and it's not God speaking, right?
Yeah.
And the best thing we can do, the best thing I think women can do as far as men are concerned then, is try to understand, I guess, some psychological best practices to be able to interpret where a guy is, right? So, for example, you can tell where a guy is on emotional maturity, whether he is combative with people or he's competitive in the way he says things, or if he's cooperative, right? So, one of my friends has a friend who's talking about how she met Drake, right? And Drake bought her a drink in the story. She's at a club, and she sat down in the section that Drake was at. He was drinking this like passion fruit drink, just so you know that he drank that. And she's like, "Oh, what is that drink?" He's like, "It's a passion fruit something." He's like, "You want one?" And she's like, "Oh, it just looked interesting. I want to know what it was." He's like, "I'll get you one." He asked the server to buy her a drink. There are some people who will treat that conversation a few different ways. Somebody who is struggling with their own self-worth could become combative and go, why is he drinking a passion fruit drink? That's whatever. There's somebody who finds something negative there. Or, oh, he's going to buy anybody drinks just because he wants to keep chicks around or whatever. Some other person may say something like that, right? A competitive guy or competitive girl might try to do a one-up story, right? Like, oh yeah, I saw little Uzi somewhere and he bought me a whole section once or whatever, you know what I mean? Or like, I was hanging out with Drake and R. Kelly or something, you know what I mean? Just like something. But then cooperative is where you let the person like live their story out and be excited, and you ask good questions about their story and let them give you details. And then when somebody tries to invalidate that, be like, no, that's a pretty cool story. It's not like he just poured her some like liquor out of the bottle he already had. He like ordered her a drink. That's a pretty cool story. Yeah. So cooperative people will defend people when they are telling something that matters to them, And so with men, this is really easy to see, because you can see that men have combative tones or competitive tones as opposed to cooperative. I think that's a good start. And then you can also see how they behave when they get off script, right? So there's one thing I said on TikTok, which is a great question to ask a guy in order to kind of see where he is like with accountability and ego and maturity, is you ask him, so where did you fail in your last relationship, right? And that sentence, that question, has a presumption that they failed in their last relationship somewhere. Now that guy, if he has this struggle with his ego and blame, he might jump to defend himself because his pride just got hurt really fast by some random first date question. But if he hears that and he then goes and says, I don't know why she's asking, and I don't know why she phrased it that way, but in the spirit of optimism, I'm going to try to search for a way I can give her a cooperative answer without getting upset that she implied that I failed. You can see how a guy can recover from a question that has like sharp edges, And these are little ways that women can better get to know a guy where he doesn't even know that she's paying attention to the deeper stuff. And so the guy that is too combative that you don't want a second date with, you're not drawing attention to that and making him feel like he's a shitty human, but you found that out and you're able to not go on a second date and not waste your time. Little things like that.
John, where did you fail in your last relationship?
I took blame all of the time, which created a vacuum of accountability where she couldn't start to take accountability for things. And I think that was unhealthy for her because any opportunity that she had to grow in the relationship, I was taking it from her by saying everything was my fault, no matter what. That was one of the main ones, I think. And so instead of having a narrative where I supported her through her personal growth and through taking accountability, we created a relationship where like there's never like a mutual accountability kind of conversation. And if I brought up something that I wanted her to take accountability for, it would then sound like an attack because it was just out of the blue. There's like we kind of created this vacuum of accountability where I always wanted things to be my fault to protect her, and it was bad. So that was one of them. And then also there's self-abandonment. I'm the kind of person to self-abandon, and I burned out because she would try to communicate how she wasn't sure how things were working, right? She's like, oh, this thing isn't working. You know how a woman's like trying to talk about their feelings and stuff. And I instantly went into don't leave me mode. But my version of don't leave me was being strong. So always trying to solve the problems. I'm like, no, it's going to be okay. We'll do this, we'll do that, we'll do that. But inside, that inner child is screaming, don't abandon me. I'll do whatever it takes for you not to abandon me. So I would step up and try to act like the strong masculine guy to be a leader in the relationship. But I was neglecting the fact that all I really was afraid anytime that she was expressing doubt in a relationship was that I had this deep abandonment feeling that I just did not want her to leave no matter what. No matter what I had to say, no matter what I had to do, I just didn't want her to leave. And yeah, that hit the end of a runway.
And your attachment style is anxious. No, avoidant.
I can't say for sure.
Okay. I'm disorganized. I'm just trying to understand.
On that.
Uh-huh. Okay. So in this relationship, what is the biggest lesson that you learned?
Well, I fell in love for the very first time. So that was great. The biggest lesson I learned is that relationships can, like committed, connected, loving relationships, bring up all of your past, bring up all of your greatest fears and challenges and stuff. And so I don't know if I have a sentence like the moral of the story is this, but I now value shadow work, right? I now value recognizing all the stuff that went wrong in my childhood. I'm now capable of being angry with my parents for their behaviors instead of just trying to be non-conflict, try to be cool, chill, like the whole Teflon, let it roll off my back. I'm finally able to say, no, that wasn't okay. I can finally get there. So in a way, it was one of the biggest gifts I could have ever been given.
How does it feel to be in love?
Gut wrenching to be on the back end of it, right? When you're okay, so when I was in a relationship, because I don't know if love goes away, right? So I'm going to try to phrase this without saying anything about like the mechanics of love. But while I was in love and in the relationship that I was in when I was in love, I was altruistic. I was playful, carefree, just kind of willing to do anything any day. I looked forward to every day. Every day was a new adventure kind of thing. And I just felt unstoppable, right? Because it was like there's a part of you that just feels like no matter what, like it's going to be okay, which is not a normal thing for a guy, right? We have these challenges we have to win, we have to achieve, whatever. And then we have value, then we have worth. But I did for a period of time feel like I was valued no matter what. Even though my childhood trauma made me feel otherwise, I still had those moments of time where I still felt like accepted and conditioned, loved unconditionally. And my behavior followed that. But I still had yet to do the shadow work. So I still had to deal with the feeling of not being good enough. I still got to get past that.
I feel like a lot of us have that wound, not enough, unworthy, unlovable. At some level, it comes back. You do the healing work on it. You feel so much better. and something else, you meet someone else and it gets triggered again, and you just go and do another layer of the same wound. I feel like those core wounds, they probably never really go away, but they get
No,
to the
healing is the
level.
wrong word for it. I
Yeah.
think they don't heal because there's always going to be scar tissue. There's always going to be
Yeah.
something. You just learn to live with it. And I think the reason why so many of us have this is because it's American culture. It's not just our family life, but we have this hyper independent capitalist world where you have to give your value to pay your rent, to buy your food, to keep up with the Joneses, buy that handbag or buy the nice phone or whatever. We're in this comparative culture that we all believe we don't have worth unless we keep up. We've built that, right? As a society, as a race, as a species, we built that. So you could have a good family and still have it. It's not going to be enough because the rest of society.
So let me ask a question. In what ways or what things have you done that have hurt women in the past? And what have you done to heal that or to change that pattern or behavior?
I don't know if to heal, like to make amends. I'm not sure if I've ever been good at making amends on things. Um, I used to lie a lot. Used to lie a lot. That comes from my childhood, right? And the fear of abandonment. So if we had a conflict, I would just lie instead of having an actual conversation. Um, and then those lies would exist in a relationship. And then if felt like the relationship was imploding or I felt like I was losing this person or whatever, I could get to a point that I would sabotage the relationship by letting everything just come crashing down, like all the truths come crashing down, right? I think my core wound as a child like led to lying. My mom was a compulsive liar too, and so backstory on this, right? I lied a lot as a kid. I said the craziest stuff. There's a girl in college who thought I was cute, who I was in choir with, and she wanted to date me. And I wasn't interested in dating her. So I said, I'm sorry, I'm emotionally unavailable. My last girlfriend was murdered. Never happened, right? That's an example of one of my many lies. And my best friend in college and my brother ended up meeting like and hanging out and being friends. And after I moved from Wisconsin to Houston, they're having coffee somewhere. And my best friend Nate's like, man, it's really sad about what happened to Sean's girlfriend back in, before college. It's really fucking nuts, right? And my brother Jacob's like, what? That never happened, right?
Oh my God.
So then when Nate came to Houston, because he ended up moving to Austin for a career in the art world, and I'm in Houston, we're like 4 hours apart. He came to Houston one day and staged like this intervention. He's like, dude, you've got a compulsive lying problem. You got to stop that. I can't be your friend anymore if you keep lying. And so that was my journey that was 22 back then. That was my journey towards being honest. And of course, I became a super zealot about it. But like lying is terrible. I'm only going to be honest about stuff, blah, blah, blah. But um, under times of duress or extreme trauma, like if I'm like, what would they say? If you apply enough pressure to somebody, you'll get a trauma response. There's like a quote that I read about that, right? One of my trauma responses is lying to get the trauma to stop, right? And so that is one thing that I've had to work on is being honest and hurting people's feelings in a moment, which will save from very bad situations in the back end. So, um, and one of the things that I regret, like I have a regret built into this, right? I had a mentor in high school. I was in the Big Brothers Big Sisters program, and he tried to get me to stop lying too. Like he'd catch me lying sometimes, and I'd make up stupid shit, and he's like, "You don't need to do that." Well, another kid in the program lied. Like another kid in the program lied and said that he like molested him. Like so, where we came from, alcoholic families, outlandish lies, all sorts of stuff. And I was going to go to court and kind of give a testimony of all these terrible lies that I told as a kid for the 10 years from 13 to 23, all the lies that I've ever said, including the murder one and all this different stuff. And he ended up killing himself before trial because the whole world turned on him. He was like Camp One, a counselor. He was a leader at his church. And then he was no longer able to go to that church, no longer able to do Big Brothers Big Sisters program. The whole, like, he got like slammed in the newspaper, like guilty until found innocent, and it just broke him down and he killed himself. And so there's a point where I was like, I'm going to tell all my lies I'm going to make this right. That was the way I imagined making amends for all the lies I've ever told, and my opportunity to confess went away. So really sad. But even with that traumatic, like, loss of the only good man, though he was like the only good male in my life ever, the only good man in my life growing up. Even with his loss, I still have those compulsions of like, please don't leave. I'll do whatever. I'll say whatever. Please don't think I'm a bad person. Please don't hate me. I'll do whatever. I'll say whatever. And that's probably the most dangerous thing about me.
Do you think lying in a way is to escape from the reality you had or your life?
To justify how bad I felt. So I actually told my best friend's mom once, we were in this car, we were in her car. She was driving me to work back when I was like 17. Because I moved out and like lived with my best friend's mom right around 17, 18. So I might have been 18. But I remember saying, I wish my life was harder for how bad I feel as a person, is what I said. And she's like, you know what? Skylar's dad would have said the same thing. And Skylar was my best friend. And so my lies lined up with that. I would lie about how bad my life was. I'd lie and make up worse memories than actually existed. Even though my childhood sucked, I made up even grander bad things in order to justify how bad of a person my mom made me feel. She made me feel like the worst person in the planet. So I started to lie in order to get compassion, to get forgiveness. I lied so people would forgive me growing up, so people would give me grace, would give me love. That's why I did it. I didn't lie to escape. I lied to justify the monster that I thought I was.
Mhm. So when people gave you that compassion, that kindness, that made you feel that you're a good person.
I can't really remember if that ever happened.
Mm.
I don't think I was actually capable of interpreting love too, right? So I'm sure there's probably plenty of people who love me and were kind to me, but it's like that stray dog that's only been beat and they're hungry, and all they want is the steak. All they want is the next meal. They can't interpret anything else but survival. I think all my receptors for all 5 love languages were turned off, right? I think I was clogged up. And so, yeah, I can't tell you back then. Like, I can't say I remember feeling loved or feeling at peace. I don't think my nervous system was ever calm, really, ever. I think I was always activated, and I just learned to coexist with it.
And as an adult, have you felt loved and safe in a container, in a relationship?
It's taken a long time, but over the last 5 or 6 years, I have, and some of it, time heals all wounds kind of thing, right? Time and intention, right? You can't just pass time, but time and intention, even working on something slightly, becomes greatly affected over time, even if you're just doing baby steps. So, I had a really good relationship when I was 28 that ended right around when I was 28. It was like 3 years long. And we cohabitated really well. We never argued, but we became like more like best friends. And even back then, in what was a really healthy relationship, I still cannot remember like feeling safe and loved and accepted back then. So it took until my 30s, I think, for me to start to really get there.
Sometimes it takes a while.
Yeah, yeah. Well, healing trauma takes time from when you know you have it, right? You can live your whole life not knowing you've got this trauma hiding away somewhere. And until you discover it, that's when you can start working. And then it takes time. And I don't think I was really aware of the level and depth and breadth of my trauma until my early 30s. I started doing mushrooms, right? So my best friend got me to do mushrooms. I realized that mushrooms are great for childhood trauma unpacking, for unpacking some stuff. And so it's been a few years since, having a medicine and the journey that comes with it.
Did you do a hero's journey or just microdosing?
Neither. I didn't ever go as big as a hero's dose. So I think like the most I'll ever take at one time is probably 2 grams.
Okay.
Maybe 2.5. Nothing too crazy. So I've never done a hero's dose.
It's pretty powerful, let me tell you.
I bet.
It is, it is. I'm still unraveling some revelations that came from mine that I still like, I don't know what happened. It's like essay related as a child. So that's still something that I'm like, okay, I might need help with that one, like professional help to unwrap that whatever happened there because something happened. But yeah, it's a powerful medicine and it's one of my favorite to do actually. Yeah.
Yeah. It's one I believe in most. Maybe it's a close that or it's a close second with acid, which I didn't do until Burning Man last year. So it's been like 8 years since I have done did it. Um, but I'll journal. Like I'll sit there in my phone and just journal thoughts in my phone and have like I was at this concert, like an EDM concert, and while everybody's rocking out, I'm just in my phone, like just dumping thoughts in there. And a lot of it had to do with like the duty of being a man, with the duty of masculinity, um, with the need to be both modern and dangerously powerful, like to be both a physical masculine man and to be a socialized, intelligent, and empathetic one. Like there's a need to be both at the same time, and that the world needs good men. And so, like my acid thoughts have a lot to do with like existentialism and what it means to be a man, and the duty of being a man, and the virtue of it, why I'm here, and stuff like that. So, um, for that reason, maybe it's my favorite because it helps me deal with my current existence and my future. So I tell people acids for the future, mushrooms is for the past.
Okay, I do want to talk. I want to start talking about masculinity and men and the masculine man and all of that. But I do have one last question.
Yeah.
What makes you difficult to love or hard to date or love and be with?
What makes me hard to date? Um, if I take this approach that everything's always cool and stuff like that, it's kind of really hard to take cues from me to know where you stand in a relationship. I just try to make sure everything's always positive, but then that's not really being forthcoming, right? It doesn't bring true, like real intimacy. Um, and so I try to keep things nice and polished and good and happy for the sake of that relationship going well. But then when the relationship needs work, how are we gonna actually do the work? Because I'm trying to hide anything not good. Right. That's a tendency. Just try to lean on the strengths, hide the weaknesses. But then the whole ADHD thing too, I think being an ADHD business owner where I can go a period of time and forget that you exist, I think is one of the other things that makes me hard to date for people who don't understand the neurodivergent brain, and maybe that can actually trigger like or activate insecurity, right, or distrust. I think so. I think that's probably the other thing that makes it.
Yeah, that's actually, I have ADHD as well, but like I need the communication. Like if I am not, but not constant. Obviously, I don't want constant. But if if a man forgets about me or goes long periods without acknowledging my existence or thinking about me, I think now when you said that, I was like, oh, I would feel a little insecure too. And I
Yeah, I
think
think I was
that's
just
what,
born for a time where people would mail letters instead, you know, right? Because like I'll be like, I'm thinking about you. I write this whole fucking sonnet. I send it in the mail, and I can go 3 or 4 or 5 days hunting buffalo, building a cabin, whatever, swinging a mat, and no one would know whether I was or was not thinking about somebody, right? Because the mail takes a while. The horse has got to get it in. And
yeah.
so that, because what that does is when you receive that letter, it's like intentional time to think about somebody and to ponder and contemplate. And then you leave the letter. It's almost like choosing not to be on your phone. It's like choosing not to be on your phone for 5 or 6 days and you like live in this world. And when you're with your partner, right, that's one thing. When you're not, it's another. So yeah, I think I was born to be a 1700s hunter gatherer, yeah.
Yeah, I think that the style of communication, it could cause arguments and difficulties in a relationship. I've walked away from people just because they have even said, "Oh, I used to have this issue in my previous relationships," and they would also like say all those things. I'm like, okay, so you are not willing to make the effort to change this pattern or this behavior if you know the people you attract, like words of affirmation or communication, or to communicate more, and you're not willing to do that, that also shows me that you're not willing to do the effort, because it's also part of the relationship is that you have to make the effort. And if someone is sharing, hey, this makes me feel special, and it makes me feel like you care about me, what we were talking a little bit earlier, and if you're not willing to show me that you are willing to put the effort, investment, time, and energy on that, then I don't want to be part of it. And I walk away, especially when this has been your pattern. And at the same time, it's like, oh, you attract the same type of women. Oh, I'm attracting you too. So what is it within me that is attracting someone like you? It's also that accountability too that I have to take. But I do know that what I desired. And if the person is not willing to give that to me, that's okay. I'm not for you,
Yeah.
you're not for me, and I'll go and find what is for me.
Yeah, you could just find somebody whose communication style fits yours, right? Because either of you could change to keep the other person, right? He could try to change and be more communicative and more thoughtful in your absence. You could also try to change and have faith and self-esteem in the periods of absence, right? Where you don't feel like you need it.
Yeah.
They're both equally as difficult for some people, right? So if you imagine trying to go, yeah, I'm just going to be cool with not talking to them for 5 days, but I'm just going to try to be cool with that. That might seem like a really big challenge, right? And then asking some person who's on the spectrum to say, I want you to think about me when you're not thinking about me, right? Somebody would be like, how the fuck am I going to do that, right? And I had one girlfriend, she's like, hey, if you're going to spend the whole day editing videos, or like you're going to get distracted all day, can you please send me a text message before you do that when you know that you're not going to be available? I'm like, that's not how that works. I sat down on my computer to do something for 10 minutes. And next thing you know, 8 hours later, I'm in the middle of a project that I just picked up. I had no clue that this 10-minute laptop situation was going to turn into a 9-hour one. If I knew that, I would warn you. And if I knew that, I probably wouldn't have sat down at the computer in the first place. Right. But so I remember feeling like this gut-wrenching sense of like disheartenment. I was disheartened because what she's asking me to do is to change my nature or to predict when I'm going to have this ADHD rabbit hole hyperfixation, which I can't. So she was asking something from me that was impossible, right? And in turn, I didn't think to ask her for her understanding that I am exactly this way and this way is okay. And then we probably would have had a deep, like a bigger conversation about whether or not we're the right fit at that point. But I will say, for my personal testimony on this, it's probably equally as hard to do either one. For a leopard to change his spots here, or the other leopard to change their spots over there.
Yeah, and it's also like part of your attachment style too. Like for example, I think I lean more toward the disorganized. Both I can switch between the anxious and avoidant. I have both. But when the communication is not there, I have noticed that I do have the anxious, that it gets activated. My anxious attachment gets activated. And all I want is to connect back with the person so I can feel safe. And it's at those times that I'm like, oh, what's happening within me? Why am I feeling this way? When I trust this person, nothing's going to happen. And it's also like based on what's happened in previous relationships. So that's work to do. But when you notice that and when you become aware of it, you can also be like, okay, well, this is also me and my anxiety. This is nothing that he's doing, or he's like he's been evil about it, or intentionally not wanting to talk to me. This is just also part of what I have to do for this relationship, do my part and do the healing work. But also, like, if he's not willing to do that, that also tells me a lot for me, myself. Like, that's just something for me.
And well, for some people, that thing that you want them to do might be easy for a certain person. Yeah. For some other people, it might be impossible. I think when we boil it down, it's feeling connected to the other person, right? And if you feel connected to that person, even in their absence, you'll feel more safe.
That matters with couples communication is managing the inner dialogue, right? If we have a positive internal dialogue, then we can survive even days without each other, right? But if we have negative inner thoughts, we try to reference like past experiences, recent ones, to try to validate or fight against those negative thoughts. So if you just had a positive conversation with your boyfriend and then something bad happens to you that day, right? And then you start to have these sad feelings. Well, those sad feelings will stay compartmentalized into whatever the thing was, right? And it might have been work related, might have been friends. And then you'll be so grateful for your boyfriend that you just had a conversation with who's real sweet to you. Now, you can have sad thoughts out of the blue or something with a stimuli, like your friends got into an argument or whatever. And if you haven't talked to your partner in a few days, all of a sudden you really don't have something to grab, right? So I do think that is one of the mechanisms. Some of us need reassurance to fight off the negative thoughts that make us feel like our relationship may be unhealthy, or like the limiting beliefs, right? Some people, they just need to not have bad experiences, right? They don't need reassurance and good experiences. They just need an absence of bad. And maybe this is where men and women are different, because remember, guys, like we talked about earlier, tend to interpret blame in conversations. When you say, hey, I'm feeling like we're not connected, or I feel like you really aren't interested in my day because you don't text me much, he will interpret that you're placing blame, because what he's trying to avoid is negative experiences so he can believe in the relationship. He's like, I don't care if we don't talk at all. I just want to not have any bad experiences, because if I'm out hunting buffalo, hypothetically, and all of our experiences, even though they might be few and far between, if the experiences are all positive, then I feel good. Even if I haven't seen you for 5 days or 10 days, I can look back and go, everything's good, right? I think that may be one of the difference in mechanics between men and women. And I just don't think it's actually gender specific, because I think I know women who cross that line, which is some people need reassurance and some people need the absence of negative experience to believe in their relationships. Either one could go either way.
Yeah. No, I feel like in the past, the relationships that I've had that haven't worked out, actually none of them have worked out. Otherwise I would be with them.
Exactly. Yeah. Be married or something.
It was their reassurance, but not all of them. Because like with some, I would feel so safe that I never had the anxiety. My attachment was never activated. With some people was very activated. So that's when I'm like, okay, that person is not for me. Person is not for me. I'm going to take this as a lesson. I'm going to know. I have an Excel spreadsheet where I do my inner work on my relationships. I call it the X analysis. And I literally go in there and do the patterns, and I know what I need to work on to heal whatever came up in that relationship. So I do take my accountability, my responsibility. I know my part in the problem, why I attracted the person. And this is why I love about doing the inner work. And I cannot imagine dating someone who is not conscious, who's not aware, who hasn't done this work. Like, it's just not going to work out for me. And that's going to be really hard to find someone, because not a lot of men are conscious. And I want a masculine man. So let's talk about that, because this is how I found you. And I love your content and your perspective on this. For you, what does it mean being a masculine man in today's society and dating culture?
Well, I think it goes far beyond dating, right? I think the phrase "die first" is my motto for being masculine, and I don't just mean physically, right? Because that's in war, right? The men go out and they fight the war, they take the risk and they die defending the people that they love. But to be masculine is to be the first to be wounded, to allow yourself to be wounded so others don't have to be. It's the person who goes out on the limb, right? Who has to battle their own insecurities or whatever. So when you look at dating culture, women want men to make the first move, right? This is common. And so in a way that's a version of dying first. You have to like fight your own inner battle against your hesitation to talk to somebody who could reject you, and you put your head on the chopping block. You know what I mean? And so men are both leaders, but protectors, right? So they take risks. They protect other people from risks. They put themselves in the situations of peril so other people aren't in peril, right? And then like in conversations, when there's a conflict, the masculine tries to find the strength to allow the person to unload all of their ammunition without trying to fight, defend, to squirm under the pressure of criticism or whatever. And that philosophy of dying first kind of encapsulates leadership, risk-taking, being a provider, protector, putting other people first, staying humble, kind of knowing your place in the world, not being on the take, and not expecting anyone ever to thank you. Because a lot of times people who aren't strong won't be able to thank you for your strength. You'll save them one day. You'll be there, you'll save them from some form of peril or attack or disaster. And they'll, in their scurry of like anxiety and emotions, they'll just flee from whatever environment you just saved them from. And they won't even remember that it was you that was the reason why they got out alive, kind of thing. So not expecting anyone else to be strong, I think, is a thing. So be strong. Don't expect anyone to be strong. There's another quote that I thought was cool, which is that like a great man is hard on himself. A small man is hard on others. Something like that. Yeah. So to be good by whatever like standard you want to use the word good.
How does it feel for a man when they hear that a woman wants someone that's a provider and a protector?
It depends on that man's relationship with those words and whether or not he feels like a failure around those words, right? So there could be a guy who's not like, who doesn't go to the gym, doesn't know how to fight, but he's really intelligent, right? And he decides to spend his life creating a realm of power that he has. Like he's like a lawyer, right? And a lawyer can protect people in a certain way. And in our modern culture, a lawyer or a doctor is probably a pretty good choice, right, for a partner as far as protection in modern society goes. If the apocalypse happened and society broke down, that skinny lawyer may not be able to like get you food or defend against an assailant, but in our modern society, valid, right? So a guy will look at that word going, oh, I'm supposed to protect and provide, right? And he'll go, how can I? Can I? If I can, how can I? And they'll start to build their life in that direction if they accept that calling, right? So there's a group of men that accept that calling and they run its interpretation however best suits them. So you've got guys that actually train to fight. You've got guys that just go to the gym and get big. You've got guys who study multiple languages. You've got guys that build businesses, you know, whatever. So that way they can protect and they can provide. Then you've got the guys that feel maybe overwhelmed by society, put out by society, made to feel like they'll never be able to be that person, right? They've bought the bullshit that society's given them, that they're a piece of shit or whatever, right? And then those guys, they'll do what I think anybody else does when their ego is fighting shame, when their ego is fighting the pain of judgment. They'll want to make it somebody else's fault, right? So when a woman says, I want to protect her and a provider, and a guy feels like he can't give that, and then he feels shame for not being able to give that, he will then try to externalize the blame, right? The fault for, and go, these women just want blank, or the world is fucked up for this reason. And they'll try to make it not their fault. So that way they don't have to change. They don't have the weight of accountability on their shoulders. Those guys who do feel the weight of accountability and can shoulder that, even though they might be broke, or they might be weak, or they might not have any way to protect or provide, the guys that sit with the accountability are the ones that do eventually change, and they get to a point in life that they can provide eventually, right? But the ones that never get there are the ones that parry the blame because the accountability just hurts too much. So they lash out and they act small or whatever on the internet.
Right now that you're saying all of this, I realize that I don't believe I've ever felt protected by a man.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I probably my dad in some instances, but it was mostly financial, like providing for me financially. That was his way of protecting and showing love to us. My dad is emotionally unavailable, and I just realized that. And right now and before this, like I think it was like a few weeks ago that I was just driving. And I was like, I don't think I've ever felt protected by a man, like ever. And it's so sad to come to that realization at my age and dating and having relationships. I'm divorced too. And it's sad. It's sad. And I'm like, do I desire that? I'm like, okay, I've been able to find a way to protect myself because that was something like I needed within myself because I felt so unprotected. My inner child didn't feel protected. So I have to become kind of like my own father in a way, like bring out that masculine energy within me and be like, okay, I got your back. You're safe with me. I'm going to protect you. I'm going to provide for you. I'm going to be your stability. I'm going to be everything that you need. And that's one of the ways that I have been able to heal that wound and that desired. But as an adult, even right now that I'm saying that, it's like, it's sad. But I know someone is out there and I know he's going to come and he's going to be amazing. And I'm excited for that. But when it comes, it's going to be amazing.
Yeah, it will. And there will maybe come a time where you'll have to ask yourself, am I not being protected or do I just not feel protected? In future relationships. And again, that's almost like love language, right? I'm only interpreting things through certain like signals. So, if a guy is paying some bills, he fixes your car, he makes sure that your brakes are good so that way you don't like spin out on the road, like just stuff like that. Or he keeps in really good shape and he draws firm boundaries with people and how they treat you, right? Like there's different versions of like examples where you go, wow, I didn't think I was protected until that moment, right? You might have those catalyzing moments where you go, oh, he stood up for me there, or he made sure that I was safe, right? He made sure that I was safe when I didn't even consider. My tires are bald, right? My brakes are worn down or whatever, and he repairs your car so you don't kill yourself on the road. Like there will be moments where you go, wow, that guy really is trying to protect me, right? But the whole changing your bald tires one day, that might actually happen. Hey, your back right tire was bald. I swapped it out. You may not think of that as protecting you, right? You might just go, oh, he bought me a new tire. It depends on how we're able to interpret in our relationship too. So, but we're also in a world to kind of speak on the other side of it. We're in a world where the theys of the world are trying to rewrite the narrative of what men can and cannot do or should not do or where their value is or is not. And so a lot of guys feel discouraged to make the first move, to talk to a woman, to be vulnerable, because they're like, it's not even worth it. They're going to say that they're going to say I'm harassing her for calling her pretty or something. The world has disparaged men. But I think the solution for that is to again train men from a very early age to value different things and to be brave and to accept that other people are going to be weak. And you just say, so what? Like, oh, I do all these things for people. No one ever says thank you. Okay, so what? Are you doing those things for the thank you, or are you doing it because it's your principle? You do things on principle, right? Oh, I thought that woman was beautiful and she thought I was a creeper for calling her pretty. So what? Right? You wanted something from her. Maybe you are the creeper, right? You're so mad that she thought you were a creeper, then it's either your feelings are hurt because there's something in there, or you were hoping that she'd give you a positive response and you'd go on a date. So you did have a motive. Let's be honest, So I think we need to train men to do things based on principle and that authenticity that comes from duty and virtue and principle. I think the rest of their lives will just kind of start to flow into place, and we'll have men that provide safe spaces for women, and then women will be more open to a guy having a strange conversation with them. They don't know him, just at whatever spot. But we've spiraled downward into a world where men are too afraid to say anything. The only men who do say things are the ones you don't want them to say anything, because they're the ones that disregard the cues from women that have driven us to the part of society where now women are fighting back, going, "Oh, we don't want male attention," right? The ick, right? So because of ick culture, the good men don't do anything, and the bad men still keep coming, right? And yeah, we have to undo that, but it's complex. There's no one solution to it.
I feel like a lot of women, I speak for myself too, because I've been through this. It's like we feel very objectified, very over sexualized. We feel like even if a man wants to take us out for a dinner, like they expect us to sleep with them as a form of payment. So our bodies are expected to be the payment. And it doesn't work like that for many of us anymore. And many of us have experienced catcalling. That's huge in my culture. and trauma from being sexually harassed, essay, a lot of things. So a lot of us also have to do that inner work for ourselves, just for our own good. But it is a culture where there's a lot of objectification. And there's times that I don't even want to post a gym selfie anymore because the amount of men that comment on me. And I'm like, I'm not posting it for male attention. Like, I'm not even doing that for that. So I stopped. There's things that I have stopped doing too, just because I stopped feeling safe around men after being harassed at my last job, sexually harassed, and having gone through that experience. And I find myself right now doing the inner work to feel safe in my body again, to be safe, feeling safe, being seen again. And I've noticed that how that's carrying out in my social media, that I'm kind of pulling myself back a little bit. So a lot of us have experienced that. So it's not like we don't want to receive compliments, but it's the energy and the intention behind those compliments that we think that men just want sex. That's all they want. The way they look at us, like we feel the energy, and that feels very invasive, and it doesn't feel safe.
Yeah. There's probably a few things with that. Men don't know how to connect, and they're raised to not be emotionally vulnerable, like we talked about before. So the only way they know to connect with anybody is with the opposite sex, because men don't talk to other men. And the only way they know to experience connection with a woman is physically. So men who want emotional connection or any intimacy or camaraderie, they try to get it through physical intimacy with women. So it's like they're emotionally handcuffed. So that's what happens. I think there's a cautionary message to women in the story too. There are a lot of men that are not safe, but then to avoid men, because many men are unsafe, you won't find the safe ones. And if there's one safe man in a room full of 50 men, you'll feel safe with the one safe man in a room of 50 of them, right? So it's I think what women need is to be able to identify and find the safe men. And even if they're rare, just being able to find one is enough to make you feel comfortable in an environment. And then I think the nature of relationship changes at that point too, because when there is a man that you respect and you admire and you're attracted to, you want him to look at you the same way that the other guy looked when you got the ick, right? But when you know he is a man of character and he's a man of self-discipline, and that look didn't come easily, right? And it just didn't go to anybody either, right? You want somebody to you want to feel that heat of desire from a man when it's the right one, right? Mm-hmm. So, and that's the issue, is like a man who has no self-control over his desires, there's no compliment in his desire, in a way, Mm-hmm. So we need to find a way to kind of rebalance our relationship between men and women. And I think one of the less effective things women can do is to avoid all men, because so many of them are unsafe. I don't have a solution for how to find the safe men in a room of random strangers, but there's got to be a way, right? There's got to be a way to identify the good men in public and just be near them, right? I noticed that people hang around me, like people start to like hang in my general vicinity, probably because they think that I'm a man of I don't have this shifty look, like they like, this guy's probably a good guy. If I'm going to hang out at the bar, I'm going to hang out near this guy in case there's like a creeper. This guy looks like he'll protect me. I think maybe I just have that look, if we can create more safe men, then the percentage will change and it'll be easier to find safe men, but it's a project.
No, I believe they exist. I know that. But even I've noticed too at the gym, I told you I work out super early. I'm like crazy. I work out at 3 a.m. And I've noticed that when a new member comes in that I don't know, a man, I don't feel safe. Like I noticed that right away. And it's just like an immediate like trigger that my body just doesn't feel safe when the man hasn't even done anything. And it's just like, okay, like we still need to work on this, because this cannot continue the way that my nervous system feels so unsafe because of my experiences. And I acknowledge that, I know, but it's also like, okay, like this is probably going to take a little bit longer, but I feel like having these conversations just opens up for me to be aware that there's still like safe men out there. There's still good men out there. There's still men that have really good intentions. And just because they compliment you, it can just be a beautiful compliment. It doesn't have intentions behind that, like bad intentions. And it's just something that I still have to work on.
Yeah. There's an explanation for this phenomenon too that I heard that I think helps validate your position, because I know you don't want to feel danger around any strange man, but somebody talked about gun education, like gun ownership, and they're like, what do you do when somebody hands you a gun? You're like, well, the first thing you do is check to make sure it's not loaded, right? Check the barrel, check the magazine, because it could be loaded. Well, what if somebody says the gun's not loaded? Be like, well, I'm still not going to trust it, right? Because a gun can kill you, right? You need to treat every gun as if it's loaded no matter what, because it's dangerous. And so the guy said, well, in gender, almost every single man is capable of greatly harming a female, just size alone. Like I'm 200-ish pounds, like just under 200. I'm much bigger than most women, right? And if I wanted to damage one, I could quite easily. So women, and because men are capable of being assailants, and that exists, even though like gun accidents are very rare, they're probably just as rare as sexual assault, or gun accidents might be more rare than sexual assault, right? With that said, because the nature of the danger, then women need to treat every man like he's a loaded gun until they know he's not a loaded gun. It's a similar mindset. We are in a world that violence exists, and until we change that, it's okay for a woman not to trust a stranger. Yeah.
It's not easy because you try to be nice. This is what happened with my last job where I was sexually harassed. I was just talking to him, having conversation. We started having things in common, and he just started liking me, and he was married. And that's when it was just not okay with me. And it's the boundary that I was just talking to him. He was my coworker. I thought we were having interesting conversations, and I was just being nice and kind, and he took it like I liked him. And it's also this like I never gave I didn't feel that I was giving him those signals or those messages whatsoever. Like it never came across. So now it's that having caution, and I went from saying some men to not all men to all men. And it's like you said right now, it's just part of the healing journey. It's part of the process. And I know it's going to come to safety one day when I meet the right person. But right now I'm on that journey, and it's been a year.
So maybe it is good that women find men to be actual friends with, ones that are capable. And as soon as you have one, keep them around, right? Because having safe men in your presence, life is a little bit easier, right? I think women want a safe man. They want a safe man around at all times, right? They want to protect her around, even if it's just a friend, non-romantic partner. Everybody wants a good man within shouting distance at all times, right? Because then the world feels more safe. Because men are really the only gender capable of really protecting anybody, outside of modern technology. We need good men, right? And we need to encourage that, right? I think kind of like the talk that we're talking about, like your love languages, where you say you feel the most loved when somebody gives you words of affirmation, instead of going farther, going, so I need you to give me more words. The first version of it is kind of encouraging, like it's optimistic, like he's like, oh, I've learned something about you that I can use to create a better relationship. It has an opportunity in there, right? It has positive spin to it. If we encouraged men to be safe men because we herald them, we idolize them, we made them heroes in our culture, we gave them screen time, and we made them feel like the coolest people on the planet, good, safe men. If we made a culture to be like, good men are the best, right? We love good men. We love men like this, right? More men would try to step up for that because they would love the acknowledgement. They would love the validation. They would love the inclusion. They would probably answer the call if we made it an attractive destination. But our society because of all sorts of topics outside of gender and outside of gender roles, our society's a lot of separation. It's like political separation. There's a lot of divisiveness. So we tend to push and blame and point fingers and create borders and create enemies and create fault. So we don't have a culture that does that in almost any way, that encourages the archetype. We don't encourage archetypes like, oh, like we need to spend an unreasonable amount of energy like marketing the archetype and loving and having gratitude for archetypes across all variables. And if we look at the male archetype that's best for society, and if we spend all this resource saying these are the best men, we love these men, instead of saying, oh, there's so many bad men out there, there's so many dangerous men are a problem. If we shifted that whole narrative to pointing at the few good ones and going, these are the men we love, men would start to step up. They'd be like, I want to be one of those loved men. I want to do that. Men will do anything, right? Men will do anything for the love of a woman. So if we actually gave them this path, this optimistic path, I think they'd take it.
But what's the way to do it?
Well, we need as a culture need to stop creating separation and saying this is why we have problems or who's the problem. We actually need to stop looking at who the problem is and start looking at who the solution is, right? We need to have our eye on the positive. It's almost like manifestation, right? If you're afraid of something, you also manifest the thing you're afraid of because it's in your realm of awareness. You're fixating on it. So instead of us having conversation about bad men, right? We have conversation about good men. Instead of having conversations about the bad women, like in this example, like you said, like there's like men think that if they buy dinner, they get sex, right? And thus they objectify women, blah, blah, blah. Well, there are transactional women out there that are like, we call them foodie calls, right? Where a woman hits you up to get free food, right? Like it's called a foodie call. Yeah. And there's women who professionally date on Tinder and Hinge and Bumble. They go on 4 or 5 dates a week just so they can get taken to restaurants 4 or 5 nights a week and they don't have to pay. There's women who live through free food and through first dates. And I actually had a friend tell me a hilarious story about one once. It was nuts.
No way.
And I had one where this girl was this completely broken human. She totally catfished me. Like she energetically catfished me where she was smiling in her photos. She was happy. She had clear skin. She was healthy. When she showed up, sure, she was a little bit heavier, but that really wasn't the problem. She was a sour, angry, jaded human. And during the date, she was just pessimistic and negative. And she would have been combative if I let any conversation go that direction. I was constantly closing off these spaces where she wanted to like be combative. By the end of the day, she's like, I'm sorry, I'm just really jaded. Like she saw it and she apologized at the end of it. And so at the end of the relationship, I'm like, hey, I hope you find a way to be happy. Bye. Right. I still paid for the dinner and moved on. But there are women who are mercenaries in the dating world because they also blame men for the faults of men. They've stepped into these roles that want to punish men for their faults because they feel like they feel vindicated, they feel validated for it. So I think we have men and women on both sides of the fence that have spiraled down into this lower level of like punishing the other gender through the mechanisms of relationship and dating and all this other stuff. So both sides need to elevate. Men like obviously need to find ways to get their needs, emotional needs met, and their needs for like companionship and connection met outside of the only one that they know, which is physical intimacy with women. They need to fix that because then they won't push so hard for the thing that gives everybody the ick, right? And if men can become emotionally safe, then they'll become physically safe. And when men become physically safe, you don't have the inclination to have this weird feeling in your gut when a new guy walks in the room, right? But sure, I think the source of the change will have to come from the behavior of men, but the way we change the behavior of men is like saving them. We need to work on our men if their behavior is going to change. So
I feel like women, once we step into our feminine energy, we are the ones that inspire men to change or to, inspire them to have the desire to change and to become better. And I feel like a lot of us who have trauma and who have dealt with toxic relationships, and who are more the type A, the driven hustlers, we struggle to tap into our feminine energy, but with the right men, it is possible. Like it's happened to me that I'm completely different in relationships. And it got to the point that my older brother, because I'm a little bit of a feminist. Okay, I'm a feminist. I do have that in me, intersectional feminist. And they think I hate men. I'm like, I don't hate men. I just like I hate the men that I attracted. Yes, of course, but it's also because I didn't love myself. I understand the patterns. I understand why I attracted them. But my brother thinks that I'm like this, like feminist bitch in relationships, and I'm like, I'm not. Like I am not. Like I'm not. The last one, I did reacted because I was standing up for myself, and he just said I have an attitude. I'm like, I'm sassy, I'm fiery, I'm an Aries, I'm Latina. I have that in me, but I was not lashing out. I handle my anger, I handle my emotions, I do the inner work. But it's just funny how like people don't know how I am in relationships. I'm like, it's okay. You don't have to know. You're not the one in that relationship with me. But once the woman steps into her feminine energy, it changes the entire dynamic of the relationship, and it inspires the men to become better.
It can. The guy has to be capable of receiving that and be in the right ballpark. But I think it's a two-way street too. A woman will step, or a woman will relax into her feminine in the presence of a masculine
Yeah.
if she's capable of it, right? Because there's divine feminines, divine masculines, they're out there. And in their presence, if you're capable, you'll feel it, right? If you're capable. Some people aren't. So when a man meets a muse of a woman, right, he could respond, right, and he'll answer the call if he's capable. And a woman will relax and soothe in the presence of a grounded, calming masculine man if she's capable. Um, and I guess that's probably the variable there. Some people can't. Some people can't. Like some women cannot get out of their masculine because they've been trained to be in it so much, right? And I've noticed that women who are incapable of getting out of their masculine will combat the concept that women should ever be feminine ever at all anyway, right? They challenge the notion of feminine energy because it's just like when I said guys can't be protectors or providers. If they can't handle the weight of accountability for not being able to protect or provide, they'll try to parry it off and blame women for the fact that women say, oh, they want a provider, they're just gold diggers, whatever. The guy will fight it, right? Because he cannot provide.
Yeah.
Same way that a woman cannot embody her feminine energy, she'll try to fight that and go, we don't need to be in our feminine because men are the problem or whatever. Like, or men are just jealous that we're able to fend for ourselves now, or like whatever they'll say whatever they want to say. But a woman who can take accountability for the fact that she's imbalanced and she's not capable of accessing both sides, she'll eventually start to get back there. Just like the same way that if a guy can be accountable for the fact that he can't provide, he'll work on it. You know, I think there of course has to be accountability for there to be change, because otherwise we'll just always fight it.
Yeah. I feel like the easiest way for women to connect with their feminine energy is out of our relationship, doing the work on herself, because that's exactly how I started reconnecting with my body, reconnecting with my womb, reconnecting with my menstrual cycle, reconnecting with my inner child, doing things for me, learning to really love myself, and then switching and being able to have the dance between the masculine and the feminine energy at the gym, masculine energy. And now today I'm switching between masculine energy at the gym, but sometimes my workouts are very in my feminine energy. Like I integrated Pilates, I integrated like yoga, other things, other movements. So it's always a dance throughout the day when you're at work. And when you're at work too, you can also switch between both. And it's everywhere. So the easiest way to do it for us is on ourselves. But once we're in our relationship, if a woman doesn't feel safe, and I'm pretty sure it's the same for men, we are not going to be able to lean back into our feminine energy and drop our walls. We are just not going to be able to, because our nervous systems are not relaxed. We are not relaxed. We don't trust even ourselves that somebody can take care of us. We just are not able to surrender and trust. And then we just can't, because we're so used to doing everything. We're so used to the hustling. And if we don't do it, and it's like the over functioning that we're so used to doing in relationships. So when you do lean back, it just changes everything.
Yeah. I think if we feel alone, we focus on survival, and Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? We're going to start with the very bottom. Can we get some shelter? Can we get some food? Can we get some warmth? And then the second level is like, are you a friend or an enemy, right? Being able to identify who around is a threat and who's not. So that is finding people to have companionship with that aren't trying to kill you. That's just level 2, right? And I think maybe level 3 is like feeling like you have a sense of self-worth, like some commerce between those people and you, like you're actually providing. It's like an ego thing. But those 3 lower levels can very frequently be masculine, right? To survive and not die is a pretty masculine endeavor, I think.
Yeah.
And that's why we are that way. We have to get to a point where we have faith that those 3 are just there, that we've met them, and we can get to like a more transcendental relationship with ourselves and with everybody else. But yeah, I think the very lower levels of survival inputs or impulses are masculine energy driven.
Yeah, and they have to be. It's just like it's part of us. Like we also, it's like the thing that people don't understand that both of these energies are within each of us. And you have to be able to balance both, and you have to be able to also be your own provider, your own protector, while also being in a relationship with someone who embodies those qualities. So it's also, but I feel like for me, the way that I was able to attract men who actually embody those, even though the relationship didn't work out, I know I'm an energetic match now because I've been able to attract those men. It's because I was able to do it within me. And I'm probably still not overdoing that journey. It's like an ongoing journey. It's an ongoing journey. And it's just becoming aware when you are in your masculine, wounded feminine, and when you are in your empowered, and when you need to do the dance and the switch.
Yeah, they do say your vibe attracts your tribe. So
yeah,
by embodying something, you find more people that resonate with that.
Yeah.
And yeah, maybe that's why some people only have like argumentative, combative relationships. That's if every ex is crazy, maybe you're the crazy one, right? That kind of thing. Yeah, and I think I've noticed a difference in my companionship, like the people that I spend my time with and the way that they think, because I've changed the way that I think. And the people that have come in and out of my life tend to reflect more of how I see the world. The whole concept that everything is a reflection.
Okay, I have one last thing that I want to talk to you about. I know we've gone over time.
Yeah, what's
but
on your mind?
This is also part of the reason why I wanted to bring you in here, because I do attract women who want obviously the provider, but when they think of the provider is financial provider. There's a lot of women, and obviously like I see this on TikTok all the time, YouTube all the time. And I know you have an Airbnb, very successful business. You have a huge platform in YouTube. For dating, how does dating come about for a successful, wealthy man?
I think there's probably a greater conversation to be had on that, though, too. I'm going to try to answer your question. I'm going to try to answer it in the specific way that you put it. But like you said, women want a provider, but they believe that provision means finances, financial provision, right? That's what they believe. I think women need to back away from that, because the truth of provision is like resourcefulness, really, right? Being able to acquire resources. The only one we're measuring, though, is money in our culture, right? That's a thing. So that needs to change in order for us to really have healthy relationships. I think in order to attract a man who has wealth, or who has a high income, even though he may not have wealth or like net worth, he's got a high rate of income. It's understanding what makes men like that. So you have, in order to find them, you need to understand how they work. So where they come from. A lot of men who end up making money do it because they've got a disposition, right? They're just inherently unsatisfied with their life, or they have this incessant need to prove that they're good enough, and they try really hard, or they feel like they are called for something more. Like it's like a superiority complex. Some guys have that. And they're like, I'm going to do bigger things than everybody else because I'm supposed to. And they're really hard on themselves. And these guys will like not be visible for a good period of time because they're working on stuff. I think that's one of the things too, is like when a guy is working on making money, he won't be visible because he'll be occupied. And then once the guy has it, a lot of times when a guy has it, if he slows down, it's so that way he could live the life that he hoped that he could have when he was younger, right? So he might go through a phase of young money where he goes to the club and does stupid stuff and he buys a nice car and things, and dating that guy usually doesn't work out, right? Because that guy thinks that the world owes him everything because he tried his ass off to become wealthy, because he's like, I'm a piece of shit unless I have money. And now that I have money, I must be the most important thing in the world. And he's like full of ego and stuff. That's a dangerous relationship. So there's caution there. If you date a guy just for his money, you'll earn every penny of it the hard way, right? So beyond that, it's finding a person who's like mastered the game of capitalism, but also has adjusted to it so that way he's not toxic about it, right? I think that's a more important thing. And how to find that, can be tough. But I'll tell you, like, if you move to the right city where there's a high average income, there's a concept of like birds of a feather flocking together, or concepts of masterminds, and people have an influence on each other. Harvard did a study that your income will be an average of the 5 people you spend the most amount of time with, like stuff like that. There are pockets where people make money. And what happens is all of the people in that society, they start to do better because they're hanging out with other wealthy people, stuff like that. So if you simply exist in places that have a higher rate of wealth, like certain like galas, nonprofit events, certain neighborhoods of cities, by existing in those places, you will start to make friends with people who exist at those financial levels, both men and women, right? Which will get you exposure to iterations of these men. And you have to not, so but here's the thing that I think a lot of people won't do this right. You have to not be on the prowl, right? It's almost like you have to know, you just have to kind of know in your gut that you're going to have a relationship one day, and you have to not be looking for it. You know, that whole thing, it shows up when you're not looking. If you want to change your life, then you start showing up in these more affluent areas and going to these events, that so that way you are now in a community. And the byproduct of being in that community will be that you make friends that are more wealthy, men and women who have access to business owners and entrepreneurs. And then you'll be at a kickball league, and you're going to be in this kickball league where 5 of the 8 people on your kickball team all make like 5 million a year or more each person. But you're just there playing kickball. You're not trying to date any of them, right? You're just trying to exist. So you exist in these worlds where you start to have access to people who have that kind of money, and then you start to see your relationship with it. Because I think a lot of girls don't have like understand their relationship with money or power or wealth, and they get stars in their eyes, and they fuck it up. Pardon my French, but they meet a guy who has money and they fuck it up. They need to be worthy of that person that they date. And surprisingly, what I mean by that is they have to have a sense of self-worth that is authentically worthy of a person that they want to be with. There are women who are like, I know my worth. I know my worth. I don't date dusties or whatever, but they don't actually think that they're worth much at all. These women, their outer dialogue doesn't match their inner insecurity, even though they talk on the outside like, oh, I know my worth. I'm high value. They don't actually mean it. You know, if you gave them some truth serum. But by you existing in a world full of men and women who are affluent, and seeing how average and how regular these people are, you stop putting them on a pedestal, and you start to feel more their equal. And now you are, because you feel that way. And then the side effect of becoming equal to them is you start to date one. It just happens at that point, right? So you have to not just say, oh, I'm worth it, and hope that that makes it happen, because that's not how manifestation works. You know, this can actually follow the format of manifestation, which is it has to be so real for you that it doesn't feel special. It has to be so real that it doesn't feel special. So you have to really believe that you are one of this group of people that just happens to date rich people because I just happen to be that person. It's just real. You know what I mean? So I'm saying that the best way to do it is to not date up, but to get up. So you're not dating up. because you belong, you deserve it. But it's true. It's in your fucking gut. If you're trying to date up, there's probably a mechanism for dating up, probably. But I'm not sure how often that works out, right? Where you date somebody who's intentionally above your league and you know it and they know it. And then there's a respect issue, probably. He's probably dating other women at the same time because there's always going to be some dynamic like that. So you can show up at a nice restaurant like Carbone's or Steak or like all these other places where it's $150 a plate, and you just sit at the bar and order one drink and nurse that drink for 4 hours and hope some guy walks through the door. But chances are the guy that goes up and hits on you also doesn't belong there, and he went there because he heard that hot chicks go to that steakhouse. You know what I mean? And you can just hang out at those restaurants and hope somebody picks you. But that probably won't work out very well either, you know? But what I guess what I will say to add kind of a final note on this, men who have gone to war value peace, right? And most men who are capitalists and are successful, they look at business like war, right? We go out there, we make money, I'll put another company out of business, right? I will kill a family figuratively by ending their business, right? And their kids, they'll have to leave private school and go to public school if I put them out of business. I'm willing to do that to another company for my company to succeed. There's war there. So when I come home, I want peace, right? I want peace and I want purpose and I want femininity. And those of us who are tired from war know how to recognize somebody that's peaceful, right? So we're not going to be attracted to the girl who's trying to tell us how they are worth it, right? They try to tell us how it is and how they're so great and how they go on trips to whatever, and they're flashy, right? We value somebody who makes us feel peaceful right out the gate. And you can't do that by telling some story about how you got this Birkin bag from some other dude in Dubai. You know what I mean? We really do attract what we embody. And there's no words that you can say. There's no clothes that you can wear. You really do attract what you embody. And so when you look for your divine polarity, you say, what kind of guy do I want? And what is his divine polarity? And if you can get there, then straight line.
This is huge.
Thanks for coming to my TikTok on that.
Yeah. I'm so glad I came across that TikTok and I met you and I invited you to the podcast and we were able to have this almost 2-hour conversation. I told you we start with your story and then we just go from there. I wanted to talk more about this, but I guess this was the least topic that I thought. I was like, you know what? I need to ask him about this because I do have a lot of women. And I see this on TikTok so much that women want a wealthy man. Women want a wealthy man, but I'm like, what is the catch there? Why do you want a wealthy man? Like, how is that? Is it because you want to feel better about yourself? Is it because you want to feel you're more worthy and more enough in their presence? Because you dating a rich man gives you a confident boost, an ego boost? Like, what is the actual reason why you want to date someone that's wealthy and successful? For me, I want someone that has ambition. I cannot be with a man who has no ambition, nothing beyond. Even if he has a corporate job, I still want someone that has purpose, ambition, drive, motive. I don't want someone who just comes home and sits and watches movies all day. Like, no, I need someone that has the drive like that. That inspires me. That makes me excited.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's a few different reasons why people probably want to date wealthy. One, there's a lot of pressure. The economy puts a ton of pressure on people. So you date wealthy, you no longer have to worry necessarily about finances. A lot of people are struggling on finances. There's also a common belief structure that a woman's value is directly related to the best man that she can get to get a ring from, right? Whoever give the best man to give you the highest bidder to give you a ring, your value is attached to. And that's unfortunately not true. Your value will never be based on what man picks you, but there's still a culture based on that. And women are competitive. And so when a woman says, I'm better than you because of X reason, it doesn't matter if her logic makes sense. You know that she thinks she's better than you, and you'll play her game to prove that you're better than her. So if there's a society full of women that believe that their value comes from bagging the big game guy, then it, because you care more about the feet, like the respect in that group of women, if that's your bag, you'll go and try to get the guy too. So that way you get the respect of the female community, because they're playing a game and you'll play the game that they're playing. Even though we all know it's true that no man can tell you what your value is, if a bunch of women think that's how it's measured and you want to beat them, you want to beat the girls, you'll play the game that other girls are playing. That's also a potential reason why women do it, is it's for other women, right? So they either do it to not starve or to never have to worry about surviving ever again. They do it because they do personally believe that their worth is attached to how good of a man they can get, or they're doing it to compete with other women because they know that that's the game that people are playing. There's probably other ones too, you know.
I feel like we all have to learn our own worth and value outside of relationships, outside of the status quo, the American dream, because I'm immigrant. So of course there's the American dream for me, but in the nothingness, without you having success, without you having the wealth, without you having the societal like expectations, is you're learning to really truly harness the power of your own worth and value without having any of that, and built on that foundation. I feel that's on just how you become unshakable. That's how you become secure and confident. And I feel like that's been my biggest gift in my journey. I don't care. I love my life. I love who I am. I love myself. I love my emotions. And when I close my eyes, I could cry because of how much I love myself, how much I love my heart, my intentions, my emotion. I'm gonna cry. And my why is my niece, my eldest niece. And if I can be her role model, then that for me is everything. It's like that makes me feel so like I have done my job here on earth. If I can be her role model, that's it. That's my why. She's the reason why I want to become better. Also me, I'm my main reason, but there's also 4 little girls looking up at me, my nieces. But the main one is the eldest one because she's 11. And I don't want her to go through everything I went through. And I know I cannot save her from her own experiences, but if I can show her what self-love feels like, how to embody it, how to know your worth and value, then that for me, it's everything.
Well, it sounds like you're doing a great job.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast and having this conversation. This has been amazing. This has been very fulfilling. And anything else you want to say to my audience?
Well, I guess I can say that I'm looking forward to getting to know you all, since I'm a very fresh guest to your world here.
Yes.
I'll see you all somewhere in a comment thread somewhere one day, maybe.
Yeah, I'm going to put all the links to your TikTok and all your social media. If everybody's interested in Airbnb in your business, we can also link your YouTube. I know we didn't talk about your business because I really wanted to talk about who you are as a man, as a person, your childhood, how you came about to be who you are today, and about dating. That was very important to me to bring you in because it's important for me for women to be exposed to a different type of men that they're used to. And it's okay. We are work in progress. We're working to heal our wounding with men. There's going to be a day that men feel safe again for all of us.
Yeah, there will be. I think it's an important conversation. So thank you for allowing me to put my 2 cents into that.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good day.
Yeah, you as well.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you so much for being part of this conversation on the Feminine Truth Podcast. This podcast is for you, for me, for us, for the Feminine Collective. Thank you for spending your time and energy with us. I so appreciate it. Please, it would mean so much if you could share this in your Instagram stories, in your Facebook stories, or everywhere, so this message gets spread and others can find this podcast and this conversation. And if you feel like someone needs to hear this message, please share with them. I would be so grateful for you, and let us know your thoughts, how this has helped you, how you connected with this topic, or how this has felt in your body. And lastly, if you feel the pull, I would be immensely grateful if you could take the time to leave a review so more people can find my podcast and this conversation. I'm sending you so much love, and I'll see you on the next episode.